Dr. Fauci.
Hey, Dr. Fauci, it's Bobby Bones in Nashville, Tennessee.
Hi, how you doing, Bobby?
Hey, thank you for taking a few minutes to talk with me and my show here.
Happy to do it.
You know, I was watching you talk about shaking hands, and I'm a big non-handshaker and have been for a long time. And you say that shaking hands is probably not the best way, that we should greet each other for a while. Now, my question is, what is the best alternative in your mind to shaking hands?
You know, there's a couple of things. You know, one is you just put your hands up with your palms showing. That's one thing. The other is something that's more Asian. You know, put your hands together and give a little bow. The other is an elbow bump, which a lot of people do, which is probably, you know, whatever suits you. I mean, a lot of times people just do an elbow bump, just stick out the elbow and bump like that.
I feel like, because I've been bowing to people a little bit too, and they take it a little weird, but I have to telegraph my bow. Like, if I tell them I'm bowing, they often react in a positive way. But if I just do it straight up, they think something's wrong with me. But I think Eastern culture has it right with the bow. They always have.
Yep, they have. And that's a good thing. But you're right. We need to really be careful about that. You know, this is something we say over and over again. It sounds very simplistic, but it's really effective. Is, you know, washing your hands as often as you possibly can, and just the risk of someone who is either infected and subclinical and doesn't have any symptoms, but still shedding virus from their nose when they touch their face and then they touch your hand. If you don't wash your hands within a reasonable period of time, you can, again, innocently and inadvertently touch your own face and mucosal membrane of your eyes, your nose, or your lips, and then bingo, you're infected.
Right now we're on the phone with Dr. Fauci from Washington, D.C. When do you think we'll be able to have concerts again? You know, I'm a live performer. When does that happen again?
There's no definite answer to that. I mean, the mitigation that we're doing right now is having a very important effect on dampening the spread of virus, even though certain regions of the country, particularly in the Northeast, the New York City metropolitan area, New Orleans, Chicago, Detroit, have suffered terribly, but they're not in sync with each other. So when you talk about opening up concerts, you know, you have to be careful. It depends where you are, what time is it, what is the level of virus circulation. The one thing you don't want is to have a concert where you put 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people closely packed together. I mean, as much as that's really fun and it's part of our culture to enjoy, if you look at the history of the clusters of outbreaks that have triggered things in this country, it has been those kinds of clusters that have been at events where people gather. I mean, in China was the classic example of that at a time very, very early on where they were having circulation of virus. They held like a 40,000-person block party in the middle of the city of Wuhan, which was felt to be one of the major triggers. Unfortunately, in New Orleans, the Mardi Gras was held, and then you could time it reasonably soon after the Mardi Gras, New Orleans exploded. So I think we need to be really careful and make sure that we have a really, really good control of what's going on before we start congregating people in crowds that are really quite numerous as you get with a good concert.
Would you say that these late summer festivals are a bad idea?
You know, I don't like to make general statements like that, but quite frankly, if we do have continual degrees of infection, that these kind of festivals are really, you know, really vulnerable points of reigniting outbreaks. You know, the person that likes, you know, the fun and the freewheeling that you get, that feeling when you're at a festival, tells me that's unfortunate. But, you know, we got to get through this. This is a historic outbreak. I mean, this will go down in history along with something like the 1918 pandemic of influenza, which was so devastating to the global community. This is tough. I mean, we're going to have to accept the fact that it just can't be business as usual.
All right, we're going to come back with more with Dr. Fauci. I'm going to play this song. More right after this from Washington, D.C. with Dr. Fauci. All right, back on the air here with Dr. Fauci, who is sitting on the phone with us here on the Bobby Bones Show. By the way, if you're just turning it on, Dr. Fauci has served as the National Director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases since 1984 under 6 presidents and is in the Government Hall of Fame. What do you think about restaurants? Now, will they get to open if they spread the seating out earlier than otherwise?
Yeah. So restaurants are interesting. And again, that's going to depend on where you are because there will be a relative risk depending upon the density of infection. I mean, if you have a community that has been in the middle of it, like New York City or Detroit, and you are not way, way down on your curve of the outbreak, and there's a kinetic curve to the outbreak that you could measure. It goes up, it peaks, it turns around, it comes down. If you're still in the middle of it, then you really don't want to do any restaurant stuff. It's like close down and that's it. If you're getting involved in a gradual, I call it a rolling reentry into normality, where there really is not a lot of infection going on, but it isn't all over, I think what you will likely see, and it will depend upon the local leadership, mayors, governors of states, that you likely will see something akin to what you just described. That, we went from restaurants completely open to restaurants completely closed and only taking carry-out, that you will likely see in some situations, not all, that restaurants will open, but they will have an absolute limit on the number of people they will let in, so that you would have tables that are separated by empty tables.
On the phone right now with Dr. Fauci. I grew up in a town of 700 people in Mountain Pine, Arkansas, and there isn't a lot of COVID-19 in Mountain Pine, Arkansas. So is it possible that Mountain Pine, Arkansas and other small rural areas like that actually gets back to a normal faster than some of these more metropolitan areas, like a full normal?
I believe there's no question about that. In fact, I had discussions with the governor of Arkansas, and he explained to me something I wasn't fully aware of in the state, the density of people in certain geographic portions of the state of Arkansas, that they have almost no infection at all. And the ability of their getting back to some degree of normality is considerably greater than in a place where there is a lot of density of people and a lot of density of infection.
I think what's interesting about my radio show is we're on in about 150 cities, and we're on in large cities and very rural areas. And so we have all different kinds of folks that listen to our show. I grew up in a really small town, like I said, a really rural area. And whenever you talk about masks and people going out with a face covering, now, again, is that something that we should do in all sizes of town? Or should just the more dense areas kind of prepare more so?
One of the things that you could do is to try, to the best of your ability, to stay 6 feet apart from people and not go into big crowds. If, in fact, you have that in your community, you may not need a mask.
Right now we're on the phone with Dr. Fauci from Washington, D.C. With the whole toilet paper thing, do you have an explanation now as to why people bought all this toilet paper and I still can't find it at the store?
I don't have any idea what happened with the toilet paper, just to be honest with you. I just thought that people thought places where you could buy things would shut down because of the fact that we were in a strict mitigation phase, that stores would close and certain essentials that they would need would run out. That's the only thing I could imagine. But as it turns out, the grocery stores and the supermarkets that supply the food also have these other essentials. And I didn't see that there's going to be any shortage of that. So I don't understand why people started hoarding that.
Right now we're on the phone with Dr. Fauci from Washington, D.C. I just have a couple more questions for you, and I really do appreciate your time here. Have you seen the petition to make you the sexiest man alive yet?
That would be a joke. Where were you all when I was 30 years old?
Dr. Fauci, what time do you wake up in the morning nowadays?
About 5 o'clock.
Are you still able to get your exercise in every day?
Not every day. I used to do it every day. Now, I do it on the weekend with my wife. We have a beautiful place to run in Washington, D.C., and the C&O Canal. It's really one of our favorite places. But what I've been doing a couple of times a week, I used to run at lunchtime before the coronavirus crisis. But since I'm locked up in the White House most of the day or in my own facility at the NIH. What I try to do is late at night when I get back from the White House is to try and steal a quick outside run, a power walk with my wife. I've been able to do that successfully, maybe an additional 2 nights a week in addition to the 2 days of the weekend. So we're going about four out of 7 days, which isn't bad.
Are you able to watch any sort of TV shows at all? Any Netflix at all?
Not at all. And I just have so much stuff that I need to get through that the idea of sitting down in front of a television, it just doesn't work, unfortunately.
Well, we thank you for your time. Thank you for your service. Thank you for, you've kept me sane through this. Anytime I see you on any network, I stop and watch and really dial in and take a lot of your sentiment to my listeners every day. So thank you for fighting the fight. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. It was good being with you.
All right, Dr.
Take
Fauci.
care. Stay safe. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.